Voi non avete... You have not your the translator. Okay, because the Philip part will be in Italian and... yes. Okay, thank you. Because some of the speaker needs the translation in Italian, from the Italian to English. If someone has an empty seat, please raise your hand. Alzate la mano se avete una sedia libera a fianco, così che chi c'è dietro può trovare le sedie libere e venire avanti. Ma non è funzionato. Questi algoritmi organizzativi non vengono mai considerati. Buongiorno a tutti. Il panel durerà un'ora e mezza. In this panel of 1 hour and a half, we will speak about whistleblowing used for investigative journalism. Whistleblowing is a term that means blow in the whistle, and is an historical term on the Anglo-Saxon culture. Has been well known on the journalistic environment after the WikiLeaks case. Before WikiLeaks, those kind of things has been called the leaks. Some information is leaked to a journalist. Novità per le speaker e traduzioni? Quanti di voi, how many of you just speak in English and not in Italian? Okay, and you have, maybe you need the translator things? Ah. Ah, okay. So, to be completely international, this panel has been switched right now only in English. Welcome. So, after the WikiLeaks case, happened that some media started to create their own whistleblowing platform, like Wall Street Journal or Al Jazeera. And they believe that having a system able to permit sources to send anonymously tips and data to the journalist, something will change. Because, in fact, after the Cablegate or Iraqi file, every journalist dreams to receive this kind of extremely interesting information and make the history of his life. But this has not happened. It has not happened for various reasons that will be analyzed on this panel. And those reasons mostly is that the whistleblower, the source, need to understand who is the recipient and trust to the recipient, and need to be guaranteed to be safe. So in this panel we have Tehoon of Publix, an important experiment in Netherlands that is here to explain the history of Publix, and Philippe, researcher of the Journalist European Observatory, Miranda of OCCRP, and of ERP Lorenzo, one of the manager of ERP-Leaks, one of the whistleblowing system used by an investigative journalist group, and Attila of Atlazzo, another organization that is using this kind of platform in Hungary to receive information. And that's it. We can start with Philip. My plan is to give time to every person to explain their part, and then we can collect from the audience questions, and then a loop of answers.
Io ho delle slide, le faccio partire da qui? Dov'è il...
Che sembra presente.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks everybody for being here and having me to this panel. I would like to thank Claudio and all the staff at OffshoreLeaks for inviting me with this very interesting speakers today. As Claudio was saying, I'm a researcher, so I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Lugano, the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland, where I work as a web editor for the European Journalism Observatory. We are a research center which deals with research on the media and journalism. And in particular, I'm involved in the study of investigative journalism and digital whistleblowing. Besides that, I work as a freelance journalist in Italy for the Italian version of Wired. What I'm going to do here today is to give a brief introduction about the spread of digital whistleblowing and how it is being used right now from different initiatives in journalism. So, as Claudio was saying recently, the term whistleblowing has been used more often than ever. If we look back at 2010, when the WikiLeaks case exploded, we saw a real rise of whistleblowing. Of course, WikiLeaks was the most exposed case, but after that we saw many others happening. For instance, we had OffshoreLeaks, which was a case of investigative journalism on offshore money in economic paradises, and there was a very interesting example of how investigative journalists could use digital whistleblowing. Then we have, all in the wake of WikiLeaks, different cases, such as the one of Barrett Brown and Jerry Hammond. And then last year, as we call it here in Italy, the Datagate exploded thanks to the revelation of Edward Snowden, which were published by The Guardian and The Washington Post and were recently granted a Pulitzer Prize, as you definitely know. So if we look back, whistleblowing is something that was invented by the internet or by digital natives. It is a very classical practice in investigative journalism. And if we look back at the 70s in the United States, we had at least two very big cases of whistleblowing. The first one, which is very, very famous, is of course the Watergate scandal, which happened because of a whistleblower. The famous Deep Throat leaked some information to the press. And then in 71, we also had the Pentagon Papers, when Daniel Ellsberg, which is the man you see in this slide, leaked to the American press up to 7,000 documents about the Vietnam War. So if we see at what whistleblowing is, we see that it is an individual act of a person who decides to be a sources and to leak information out to public attention. The information comes out from an organization and reaches some recipients, as Claudio was saying. This might be the media or an advocacy group or whatever. What is important is that the information that goes out from the institution has to be of public interest, has to be important and relevant and true, of course. So in this sense, the internet can be very useful in helping whistleblowers in having information out from the institution they're working from. And there is this famous quote by Daniel Ellsberg again, who said, if the Pentagon Papers would have happened with the internet, I would have published them directly on the net. So we also in the academic field, but also in the journalistic field, we read a lot about WikiLeaks. But the definition I prefer to define WikiLeaks for what it was is this one provided by Augusto Valeriani, who is an Italian researcher. He defined WikiLeaks as a bridge organization, a bridge between the internet and all the recipients that might be interested in this digital information that it is on the internet. If we look at some statistics, we can see how from 2001 to 2011, the the US administration only has been digitized up to 700 million of pages every year. So if you make the count in 10 years, you can see how many information is there digitized. Most of this is secret, and most of this is stored into digital archives. So there is a lot of information on the internet, and whistleblowers can profit from some bridges over the internet to have this information to the public and, in case, to the media. So if you look back at the history of WikiLeaks, we can at least find three different phases of the story of WikiLeaks. The first one starts when WikiLeaks was put online by Julian Assange back in 2006. when WikiLeaks was receiving documents from anonymous sources and the documents were posted online and the media could have picked them up and possibly write some articles on that. Then WikiLeaks changed because Julian Assange wanted to have the maximum political impact possible, and we can see these new phases of WikiLeaks as a content producer. If you remember, and I guess you will, the Collateral Murder video, the video about the helicopter, there was a proper content production made by WikiLeaks. They received the file by, now we know it, Chelsea Manning, and they worked on the video in order to create how to say, tangible media content. And then, always in order to get this political impact, WikiLeaks changed again. And we entered a phase when WikiLeaks started to cooperate with the media all over the world. Thanks to this cooperation, WikiLeaks was able to leak out its most important scoop, such as the Afghan wars, the Iraq war logs, and the Cablegate again. This happened in 2010, and from then, WikiLeaks has continuously tried to cooperate with some luck and bad luck sometimes with the media company. So the model of WikiLeaks in this phase is pretty simple. You can see it here in the slide. We have the source who goes to WikiLeaks, sends the documents, and then the documents are given to the media or other recipients. From my point of view, this is the best method that a whistleblowing organization can use in order to get attention and visibility about these documents. So, as I was saying, after WikiLeaks, we saw different projects coming out on the internet. And we can see how all these, in a way, were influenced by what WikiLeaks has done. Some of these projects were receiving documents and were making these documents available on the internet. This was done in an initial phase by Balkan Leaks, for instance, which is a website in Hungary which is publishing documents about what's going on in that geographic area, and they were able to provide some very interesting scoops and political scoops in the last years. Some other organizations instead are actually producing content from the documents they are receiving. This was the case of OffshoreLeaks, as I was saying before, and also Reporters Without Borders as a platform to receive documents from anonymous sources. It's called We Fight Censorship. So you can, if you have some documents, you can send them to a team of reporters who are working for Reporters Without Borders, and they will also publish articles and analysis on their websites. Then other organizations instead are going in the direction of the partnership with the media. The first one that appeared was OpenLeaks, which didn't have much luck. It was the project from Daniel Domscheit-Berg, the former WikiLeaks co-worker. The platform was intended to have different partnerships with the media all over Europe, but the project went into a hiatus and so far has never been actually operational. Also, the Associated Whistleblowing Press, it's working in this direction. They have different websites. One is Iceland related, one is international, and recently they started a new website in Spain thanks to the technology provided by GlobalX. Then, a part of this constellation of website, a whistleblowing website, we can see how whistleblowing is still operating in the classical way. I mean, Edward Snowden was a source. He had the documents. He went directly to a journalist, Glenn Greenwald, and the team in order to give them the documents without using a bridge. So we can see how whistleblowing is spreading in different directions. Now I'm going through some very short case studies, and I don't want to overlap with the other speakers. For instance, we have now GlobalX, which is an organization which is providing technologies to other organizations and websites which are willing to create a whistleblowing platform. These are only some very recent examples. One is IRPiLeaks, of course, an Italian whistleblowing platform which has been working together with GlobalX. MafiaLeaks is another website intended to receive documents about mafia crimes going on in Italy. And in the very last 2 weeks, we saw also NavatLeaks in Egypt and WildLeaks, which is a platform related to documents about crimes in the nature and against the environment. All these websites were created thanks to the technology of GlobalX. But the environment of whistleblowing is also constantly changing. It's very difficult to define a pretty model which is okay for every kind of case. We also have Publics, which Theon will later go more in details, which is a very interesting project going on in the Netherlands, where a lot of media companies are involved together in a collective project. And to give you some more insights, this is BalkanLeaks, which is the platform I was talking about before in Hungary. They have a technology which is called Secure Chop. It's a Dropbox for receiving documents. And as I was saying, they were able to provide some very important scoops in their area thanks to the work of BVOL, which is a collective of investigative journalists. This is, again, Reporters Without Border with the We Fight Censorship platform. As I was saying, they are receiving the documents, they're working on that, providing analysis and articles. What is interesting about this project is that they also want to publish articles which were censored. So if a source knows that a specific news or an article didn't come out in his or her country, can give this document to Reporters Without Borders, and they will try at least to publish it. Then Claudio was also mentioning how some mainstream media companies tried in the recent years to have a whistleblowing platform of their own. This was tried by Al Jazeera, and they were able to publish the Palestine Papers. This was also tried by the Wall Street Journal, but in both these cases, some experts in cryptology and anonymity technology said that these platforms were not so safe as they were supposed to be. So they had some technical issues, and maybe they are more expert than I am in technical aspects, but this was also tried by this Swedish public broadcaster, the radio. They still have a platform which is receiving documents for try to have some investigation on these documents. And in Germany recently, also Die Zeit, one of the major daily in Germany, created a whistleblowing platform which is called Briefkasten. So as we can see, the phenomenon is spreading, and the other speakers here will talk about their experiences. If you want, there is a very short, some short references here about this topic, and thank you very much for your attention. I will give floor to other speakers. Thanks.
We'll explain the experience with Publics, one of the largest organizations based on anonymous and confidential whistleblowing.
Thank you. I understand that it was Nietzsche. I'm sorry, my Italian is very bad, so I'll speak slowly in English. Nietzsche said that if you give a man a mask, then he'll tell you the truth. Because basically, the base concept of whistleblowing is that there is information that does not naturally find its way to the public and to media. And I think it's very interesting to analyze why that information does not find its way. It has, I think, two elements. There are bigger institutional structures that do not like us to know what we should be knowing. And there's the incapacity of people to get the information that is not accessible to us. So again, the basic concept of creating an environment where people can safely and therefore anonymously leak information is of great value to the force and the strength of investigative journalism, because that's, of course, what we're talking about. And leaking is, I think, not so much more than an instrument, a tool for investigative journalism. What we did in the Netherlands was the following. Actually, the idea came from me because I read a little article in a newspaper that in Belgium there are little closets in a wall, and you can leave your baby there. So you have a baby, but you can't have it, so you leave it with the nuns, and it's a secret little cabin in a wall. And I figured if that we should have for the journalistic industry, that people can leave their information anonymously with us. We went around, and I was then the director of a publishing company, and my first concept was to create that for my own company. But then I figured that does not make a lot of sense because, one, we are very limited in capacity. And secondly, it's very hard for us to establish the concept by ourselves of leaking, because for the public it is a new concept, as Philip explained. Of course, it's been happening for a long time, but in the broader public, there's not a great awareness of the possibilities of leaking. So we went around and identified not many, but a few players who could offer the technology, and came in contact with GlobalLeaks. And I think we were the second deployment or something?
Yes.
Second or third?
Mostly the first one with an aggregation of multiple media.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's
yeah, because and that was a big thing. What we decided to do is to involve as many media companies as possible. So basically, there's an online platform called publileaks.nl. And when you go there, you can leak information, but you can decide who you want to leak to. And there's now 45 media companies involved, including television, online, newspapers, local newspapers. So that's a lot of groups. And I think it's very interesting because we can divide, for example, local or specific themes. There's a journalistic magazine included. There is a magazine on transport included. So there's sort of possibilities for people to leak specifically to certain sectors. And you decide what you want to leak to, and when you press send, the information is sent totally encrypted over Tor to the receiving media, and they, in first instance, receive an email that there's something in their box. And then they have a dedicated laptop. They all have the same laptop, which is very specific technology. I'm very impressed, actually, how that works.
The LeakStop.
The LeakStop, that's right. Which basically, it's a laptop, but it does not have an operation system on it. It has a USB stick, which is encrypted. So it only works when you enter the USB stick, and only in combination between the laptop and that specific USB stick, the journalist can go to the system and upload the information. Then he has to wash it. It has to go through an application that takes away the metadata and so forth, and only after that has happened, he or she can distribute it to journalists within his company. One of the interesting things here is that you can see, as a receiving journalist, you can see who also received the information. So I have it, but that newspaper and that television station also has it. And the idea behind that was a little bit that it could be of value to cooperate for two reasons. One, it takes a lot of time and effort to research things that enter, so you can spread that. And secondly, it's safer. Because the interesting thing is, if you look at the safety chain, then there's two things. One, if you take out the USB stick and you throw it away, everything is gone. There's no track whatsoever of who sent what, it's gone. And the second thing is, once the information was leaked to several media parties, it is out there. If you have a single media party, then, secret services or other parties could still try to track and hold back the information or do something about it. But once it's out there with 9 or 10 media companies, there's no way, actually, for example, secret services to interfere with the publishing of that information. So that is what happened. We started in September last year, and it was a big thing, basically, when we came out, nationally and internationally. It led to a couple of discussions, and I'd like to share with you the experience of the deployment. The first discussion, I think, there was a lot of discussion about technology and safety and security, but I think we won that without a problem. The system is as safe as you can get it. I think there's a great balance between safety and usability. That's a big thing, but that works well. There was a big ethical discussion in the Netherlands. What's the moral issue of whistleblowing and leaking? And that discussion was even stronger after the first big leak. There's a political party in the Netherlands for elderly, and the leader of that party was also always very vehement about pensions. He always said, pensions very important, blah, blah, blah. And then it came out that formerly he was the director of a company, and he had not paid his pension dues, and he had basically intimidated his personnel that he for not paying, that they should be quiet about not paying pension funds. So that was a big thing. So the guy stepped down immediately after publishing, and this was information received via PubLeaks. Now, the discussion was who leaked it? Who leaked it? And why? Because, of course, one thing is that there might be several other political parties who have a great interest in this man falling down. There might be other interests. So it led to an interesting discussion on the moral and technical elements of leaking. We had, I think, in total about 15 real stories published so far, which does not sound a lot, but there were some very big things. Interim managers in a mental institution. There was a mental hospital, and this guy was an interim manager, and he invoiced 90,000 euros per month, and also had his assistant with him who invoiced 35,000 euros per month. So that came out via PubLeaks, and the guy stepped down, and the board of the mental institution stepped down. So, I mean, these are good things. I enjoyed them. There's two things I'd like to share, or three, for this meeting, and then I'm done. One is the filtering discussion. Philippe said that also. There's a source. WikiLeaks, in first instance, sort of directly put that information online for anybody to use. Other organizations choose to have a filtering or editing mechanism, so you receive the information, but before it's distributed, we edit it. We've decided that it is the natural mission of journalists and media to do that filtering. So we've decided that the filtering mechanism is within the media, so television and newspapers. That's very important. So the information that comes from sources is validated and researched and amended by regular journalistic infrastructures. But that also leads to two problems. The one is, how do you keep it top of mind? How do you make sure that there are people out there, because there are people out there, civil servants who know stuff, who have reports in the bottom drawer and so forth. How do you keep them aware that there's a possibility of using a leaking system to have that information come out? I think maybe that's a responsibility for all of us to make people more aware that it is possible, to make people more aware that it is safe, and to make people more aware that there might be even a civic journalistic mission for us collectively to strengthen the capacity of journalism in our controlling role. So that's one thing. How do you keep the broader audiences aware? And the other one is journalistic capacity, because you get quite a lot of information and it needs to be researched. And not all information is extremely clear or straightaway usable. So what we see is it takes a lot of time and effort to really sit down and follow up on leads, which is a normal process. You also get information via email and so forth. But the capacity of the journalistic, we're all very busy, and newspaper journalists work hard and have to meet their deadlines. So there's something there that is an issue in leaking. If you set up a structure where people can freely leak information, you get a lot of information, and that needs to be handled. If I now look back at the first few months of PubLeaks, I think it was a great initiative. It works well. We get, I think, 8 to 12 pieces a week, which are usable. We get a little more. There's also, the odd lunatic that warns us about the UFOs that will be landing tomorrow, of course. So the volume is good. I'm not totally happy now on these two aspects. I want it to be more present in the public discourse, and I think we need to think about journalistic capacity of handling the information. That's basically what I wanted to add.
I have two elements for you, because PubLeaks was the first experiment that make different media works together. And then what happens if a source leak an information to two media in concurrence between? We figured out a gentleman agreement, and can be interesting things to explain. And the other aspect is the usage of the physical paper in order to promote the PubLeaks platform. Yep. Because, in fact, a physical newspaper or a television show can have a large outreach, and this can be used to promote the platform itself or to keep attention about a specific topic. If you know something about this specific events, please leak to us, you can be safe, etc.
Yep.
And about the gentleman agreement, if you can...
It was interesting. There was a little confusion in the beginning because some media companies thought that they were obliged to work together. They said, that's impossible because I'm newspaper X and I have a competitor, newspaper Y, and we can't work together. And that was not the objective. The objective was for journalists to see that there were also other parties that received the information and that they could, if they wanted, cooperate. What it led to is very strong competition, because you get the information in, and you see that X, Y, and Z has also received it. So it's a sort of a race against the clock. And there were two very strongly competing newspapers, the Volkskrant and NRC Handelsblad in the Netherlands. And the Volkskrant it happened twice that the Volkskrant received information via PubLeaks and published it first. So that was a big thing in media, why do the Volkskrant always win this thing? So I think it led to competition more than cooperation.
Okay, because one of the hypotheses at the start was create a sort of embargo period in which nobody has to publish the information in order to make sometimes to make the verification and the research.
Yep. Didn't happen.
That can happen. The competition has won. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seun.
Okay.
And now also Attila of Atlazzo is one of the oldest organization using a whistleblowing platform, and you can get an experience based on a Hungarian application.
Thank you very much. So Atlazzo is a fairly new NGO in Hungary, which was created in 2011, and its whole existence started, in fact, with whistleblowing and leaking, because one of the first articles we published, so basically the first week of operation of Atlazzo, we published an article with a leaked document, and the following day there was the police knocking on the door of our editor-in-chief, which led to a police investigation. He was under police investigation, and Atlazzo played a very prominent role in changing the source protection legislation of the new media law in Hungary. So we were very active to go to the Constitutional Court, and we made the Constitutional Court change the Hungarian source protection regulation. So our whole operation has started with leaking and whistleblowing, and we became known to the Hungarian public because of that. So everybody knows that the only credible organization to which it's worth leaking is our NGO. I have to note that the trust in mainstream media in Hungary is getting lower and lower. So our NGO really started in a context in which I think we play a really important role. So in 2011, we started with showing that we are able to assist leakers and whistleblowers. Ever since the NGO defines itself as an anti-corruption watchdog investigative journalism site, so we publish investigative journalism articles, we file freedom of information requests to state institutions, ministries, local communities. We have a very strong legal department, so we sue the government and we sue different organizations for information. And we operate three interesting platforms, and I will turn to the leaking platform finally, but just very briefly, we have a freedom of information request machine. So every citizen can file freedom of information request very easily, so they only have to type the question, and the platform prepares an official request which is automatically sent to the ministry or the state institution. And last year we started the Hungarian version of the ipaidbribe.com, which can also be considered like a leaking platform. It's a platform to which every citizen can upload and write their stories about corruption, like petty corruption, everyday corruption. And we also operate a leaking platform which is called OffshoreLeaks. It's a Tor-based secure platform guaranteeing anonymous leaking. It's developed by OffshoreLeaks, and I think it's quite successful. So it's the traditional secure platform. Editors get an email notification if somebody is filing some kind of information or message or document, and we also use the secure platform to get access to that information. And we have like on a monthly basis, like 5-10 notifications. Some of them are worthy, so some of them we can deal with. Some of them are documents, some of them are just tips. But we think it's very important that we operate that platform. If the readers or the audience go to our site, they can. One of the first options on our site is the leaking option, and we offer several leaking possibilities. One is this secure anonymous platform. We also offer email and not secure possibilities to leaking. And I have to say that audience, our readers, still prefer the not secure leaking option because it's easier. Although we really engage ourselves in giving a lot of information on how to set up the secure platform, how to use the secure platform, and we are trying to raise awareness in our public activities about the secure leaking, but most of the time people still prefer just send an email or ask for a meeting with a journalist. I mean, from a journalistic point of view, I prefer meeting whistleblowers and having real conversations with them, but just to know that people still try to use the unsecure platform. So as for whistleblowing and leaking, I think the platform and the digital platform is just one element. Our organization thinks that it's in every country there has to be an infrastructure around whistleblowing and leaking, and we are working very hard in establishing that infrastructure in which once again the platform, so the digital possibility, is just one element. I think organizations like ours has to concentrate on raising awareness and educating the public about how to blow the whistle and how to use the different possibilities and different platforms. And also we are very active in the legislation side, so whistleblower protection and source protection legislation, because I think without the legislation part, the necessary trust cannot be established in order to encourage whistleblowers. So Hungary is, according to the latest Transparency International report, Hungary is one of the few countries in Europe where there is a separate standalone legislation for whistleblowing, whistleblower protection. But all the NGOs, including our NGO, are saying that it would be better not to have this legislation because it transmits a false message to our public that whistleblowers can get a protection. The legislation is really, really very bad. So there is no real protection in the legislation. So we are trying to change the legislation, and we are trying to engage active discussions with the government and different other organizations. And one more element, I think I wouldn't go into the detail about a recent prominent whistleblower case in Hungary, but just very briefly, there was a tax authority analyst who left the tax authority and came forward and came to the press, and ever since he's saying that there is a high-level fraud in the Hungarian tax authority, a kind of cover-up. High-ranking officials are protecting VAT fraudsters, VAT fraud dealing with European Union funds. And this was a very interesting case from our point of view because it shows all the things which can go wrong in a whistleblowing case. So the whistleblower started his fight very much alone, although we were in touch with him, but we were unable to convince him to cooperate with us and show us the real documents, and we were proposing to him to start the whole media campaign together and plan a media campaign, but he was unwilling to give us the documents, so he started his case alone. And the whole case now is, although he has really interesting information and a lot of interesting stuff published, the government was able to discredit the whistleblower and minimize the effects and show, and in the public there is a small discussion, but the government was able to show that this is not a real case, also, although we still believe that there is real information and real case behind.
One question or one analysis. In your environment, the law for protect whistleblower is not enough. And in case like when the law is not enough, or when an hidden power like, I don't know, the narcos or the mafia can make retaliation and revenge on the whistleblower, what can be helpful is that the technology can provide you anonymity. Because you know that if you're using correctly the anonymous technology, also if the leaking server is seized or stolen, also if the journalist is interrogated, he cannot have any information able to recognize the whistleblower. And this kind of message can be, in your opinion, a strong motivation for potential?
Yeah, absolutely. So the digital platform can be a really very important element, but I have to admit that in our society, and I think in a lot of Eastern European countries, there is a very low level of trust to anything. So even to anonymous digital platforms, so people simply don't trust that these remain anonymous. So I think whistleblowers who have real information and good information about wrongdoings are still like very wary of coming forward, even using digital platforms. So that's why I was emphasizing the other elements of this infrastructure. So building trust around organizations, around our organizations, and in fact around other media organizations, so that whistleblowers will have a better chance to come forward.
Perfect. Thanks. Now we follow with Lorenzo of IRPI. Yes, it's better. I will collect the question after the panelist.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lorenzo. I'm a co-founder and member of IRPI, the first Italian association of investigative journalism. Actually, it's a sort of anniversary for us because we decided to implement. Well, actually, we started the very first step to implement our leaking platform 1 year ago, right here. During the festival, we gathered together with Claudio and his colleagues, and we decided, okay, let's go for it. So it's quite an event for us. What we did is actually I believe it's very challenging, considering the country we are living and working in. Very challenging, such a platform. Why? Well, for a number of reasons. First of all, this is a country in which there's no culture whatsoever of denouncing any even potential wrongdoing, let alone wrongdoing that are wrongdoings. I mean, this is the country where se ti fai i cazzi tuoi campi cent'anni, if you mind your own business, you live 100 years old, long. And it's funny, but it's the truth, and it's a mafia-like philosophy of living, and it works for the most of us. And that's a big challenge we are facing, and we were aware of it, and we still want to promote a culture of, taking the public into the responsibility of doing their own bit for the good. And I'd like to mention the great effort, by the way, Transparency International Italia is doing on this matter. They're doing great in raising awareness of the role of whistleblowers, anonymous or not, in Italy. And yeah, well, check them out. They're doing a lot of work worth reading and following. So that's a big challenge. And another big challenge, which is more, it's a higher wall, I believe. It's the lack of judicial protection on the sources, whether anonymous or not. I understand it's a common issue on several countries in Europe, and it's actually very big in Italy. Paradoxically, it's more protected the journalist who receive a leak than the leaker itself. A very first small step in a direction of protecting a source has been made recently, actually, a few months ago, with approval of the so-called anti-corruption law. There is a specific article in which is dedicated to the protection of whistleblowers. Unfortunately, it's very, how can I say, it's not at all enough yet. For instance, it's only dedicated to public whistleblowers, so public officials. There's no mention of private whistleblowers, so people who work in a private companies, etc. But still, it's a first step, and hopefully will help raise awareness within the institutions in providing more efficient norms that will allow people like me and like you to blow the whistle and feel safe enough to blow the whistle. Another challenge we face, by the way, it's worth to notice that a number of European organizations actually push EU member states to, legislate on such matter. I'm talking about the Council of Europe. I'm talking about the OSHE, even the Declaration of Human Rights as a few points on the importance and protection of sources, etc. As often happens in our country, well, we're quite slow in receiving these sovereign-national inputs. Another challenge we face in providing a leaking platform is it's a paradox because, for instance, the latest, for instance, the Datagate and the WikiLeaks, etc., actually function very much as a deterrence. Deterrence, thanks. For potential whistleblowers to approach any media or any institution. If you notice the war the Obama administration is putting in place against whistleblowers, so people obviously get scared of informing someone about any potential wrongdoing. On the other hand, though, the Datagate, the WikiLeaks, the OffshoreLeaks, they do provide a great effort in raising awareness of the role of the public in the public service. So it's a coin with two sides, and well, let's look on the good one. Going more into the practice, we opened our ERP-Leaks platform last winter, a little later than Global Leaks then. It hasn't been as successful as you, Tone, mentioned. We've about a leak a week, but then I'll have to go into explaining what the leak is in order to, provide you with an idea of the success of the platform. Because we don't have a culture of whistleblowing or on informing someone about wrongdoings, we received a lot of leaks involving very personal issues or very unclear information, or people who all of a sudden feel, surrounded by someone and threatened to death. So
paranoia.
Yeah, very paranoid people. But that's part of the game. That's part of the game. We knew we would get such type of leaks, and it's fine. Among them, we did receive quite a few good ones. Unfortunately, we haven't gone public with those. We haven't. Our story hasn't followed the leaks, the good leaks we received yet. We're still working on them. It takes a lot of time. You are very right. We are a non-profit association. We are not a media. We don't have the structure of a media organization, so that has to be taken into account. What do we do when we receive a leak? I think that's more interesting for you guys listening. First of all, it's only me and another colleague of mine who actually have access to our platform, who administer the platform, who can read the leaks, and who can get in touch and open a communication path with the leaker. It's only the two of us. The moment we receive a leak, the first question we ask ourselves is the motive, the reason behind this person to leak such an information. We don't get an immediate answer, of course, but that's like a constant point of reference for us. It has to be taken into account every time, always, for every leak. Then what the next thing we try to do is to corroborate, to prove the information she's providing is relevant, reliable, and solid enough to go on. We can't afford ourselves to spend too much time behind maniacs or paranoids. Once we do that, even partially or fully, then we actually try to get in touch for real with the source. It might be not willing to do so, it might be willing to do so, it might be willing to do so under specific circumstances, alone or in a specific place or whatever. We tend to prefer to have a meeting face to face with the leaker. It would be the best for us as journalists. It opens up a new world of potential information, seeing the guy or the girl in the eyes, and it's completely different. When it's not the case, when the leaker is not up to meeting, then we keep the communication flowing through the OffshoreLeaks platform. We tend not to use mobile phones or any phone of any sort. And another important thing technically is the sharing of the information among colleagues, among us. Because I'm very safe when I'm communicating with our source using the OffshoreLeaks platform. Claudio and his colleagues provided a very good element. It's 99% secure. 99. I don't want to brag about them and say it's 101% secure. There's nothing secure, and the moment you have a locker, there's a key somewhere that opens it. So, and that's pretty much the same for any digital device or platform. This has to be told to the source as well. We want to be clear about this. We tell him, look, this is the best in circulation. You cannot have any safer digital platform to communicate anonymously with us than this. But keep in mind that real 100% safety is a little different. Of course, this implies that some of them refuse to go on, etc. Well, that's again part of the game, and it's a pity. But we rather be very clear with our sources, so that they know who and what they are dealing with. I was saying sharing information with colleagues. As I said, I'm safe and I'm okay when I'm behind my device using the OffshoreLeaks platform. But then a whole new world opens up when you share the same information with your colleagues. How do you do it and what do you do? How do you send the information? How do you tell your colleague who lives a few 100 kilometers away about the leak you just received? And here comes the most threatening part of our job, because you see, the most fragile and weak part of this whole thing is us, is the human input. It is me who have more chances to blow up a source, or the identification of a source, or the safety of the information than the platform itself. I'm fine with the platform. I have to not to trust myself in a way that I'm careful, in a way that I'm extremely careful every time I deal with the source, I deal with the information he or she provides with my colleagues. So we use specific encrypted tools to share this information. We don't talk about it on phone. We don't text about it. Maybe it will be worth it to mention a few tools later on. We'll see. We'll see. We don't. Oh, another very how can I say threatening moment is when you meet up with a source. We've been asked to meet in a certain place under certain conditions. Well, the theory tells us that the best is to meet in a public place and never alone, never on your own. Bring always a colleague of yours together with you. Of course, there are exceptions, but this is what the journalism school teaches us, and it's a great. It's good to keep this in mind. Just to finish, I would like to go back to the motivation, to the culture we live in this country that forbids a lot of people, prevents a lot of people to inform about any wrongdoing.
Voi non avete... You have not your the translator. Okay, because the Philip part will be in Italian and... yes. Okay, thank you. Because some of the speaker needs the translation in Italian, from the Italian to English. If someone has an empty seat, please raise your hand. Alzate la mano se avete una sedia libera a fianco, così che chi c'è dietro può trovare le sedie libere e venire avanti. Ma non è funzionato. Questi algoritmi organizzativi non vengono mai considerati. Buongiorno a tutti. Il panel durerà un'ora e mezza. In this panel of 1 hour and a half, we will speak about whistleblowing used for investigative journalism. Whistleblowing is a term that means blow in the whistle, and is an historical term on the Anglo-Saxon culture. Has been well known on the journalistic environment after the WikiLeaks case. Before WikiLeaks, those kind of things has been called the leaks. Some information is leaked to a journalist. Novità per le speaker e traduzioni? Quanti di voi, how many of you just speak in English and not in Italian? Okay, and you have, maybe you need the translator things?
The man you see in this slide leaked to the American press up to 7,000 documents about the Vietnam War. So if we see at what whistleblowing is, we see that it is an individual act of a person who decides to be a sources and to leak information out to public attention. The information comes out from an organization and reaches some recipients, as Claudio was saying. This might be the media or an advocacy group or whatever. What is important is that the information that goes out from the institution has to be of public interest, has to be important and relevant and true, of course. So in this sense, the internet can be very useful in helping whistleblowers in having information out from the institution they are working from. And there is this famous quote by Daniel Ellsberg again, who said, if the Pentagon Papers would have happened with the internet, I would have published them directly on the net. So we also in the academic field, but also in the journalistic field, we read a lot about WikiLeaks. But the definition I prefer to define WikiLeaks for what it was is this one provided by Augusto Valeriani, who is an Italian researcher. He defines WikiLeaks as a bridge organization, a bridge between the internet and all the recipients that might be interested in this digital information that it is on the internet. If we look at some statistics, we can see how from 2001 to 2011, the American, the US administration only has been digitized up to 700 million of pages every year. So if you make the count in 10 years, you can see how many information is there digitized. Most of this is secret, and most of this is, so here today is to give a brief introduction about the spread of digital whistleblowing and how it is being used right now from different initiatives in journalism. So as Claudio was saying recently, the term whistleblowing has been used more often than ever. If we look back at 2010, when the WikiLeaks case exploded, we saw a real rise of whistleblowing. Of course, WikiLeaks was the most exposed case, but after that we saw many others happening. For instance, we had OffshoreLeaks, which was a case of investigative journalism on offshore money in economic paradises, and there was a very interesting example of how investigative journalists could use digital whistleblowing. Then we have all in the wake of WikiLeaks different cases, such as the one of Barrett Brown and Jerry Hammond. And then last year, as we call it here in Italy, the Datagate exploded thanks to the revelation of Edward Snowden, which were published by The Guardian and The Washington Post and were recently granted a Pulitzer Prize, as you definitely know. So if we look back, whistleblowing is something that was invented by the internet or by digital natives. It is a very classical practice in investigative journalism. And if we look back at the 70s in the United States, we had at least two very big cases of whistleblowing. The first one, which is very, very famous, is of course the Watergate scandal, which happened because of a whistleblower, the famous Deep Throat, leaked some information to the press. And then in 71, we also had the Pentagon Papers when Daniel Ellsberg, which is
Investigative Journalist Group, and Attila of Atlazzo, another organization that is using this kind of platform in Hungary to receive information. And that's it. We can start with Philip. My plan is to give time to every person to explain their part, and then we can collect from the audience questions, and then a loop of answers.
Io ho delle slide, le faccio partire da qui? Sorry about that. Thanks everybody for being here and having me to this panel. I would like to thank Claudio and all the staff at OffshoreLeaks for inviting me with these very interesting speakers today. As Claudio was saying, I'm a researcher, so I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Lugano, the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland, where I work as a web editor for the European Journalism Observatory. We are a research center which deals with research on the media and journalism. And in particular, I'm involved in the study of investigative journalism and digital whistleblowing. Besides that, I work as a freelance journalist in Italy for the Italian version of Wired. What I'm going to do...
Okay. So, to be completely international, this panel has been switched right now only in English. Welcome. So, after the WikiLeaks case, happened that some media started to create their own whistleblowing platform, like Wall Street Journal or Al Jazeera, and they believe that having a system able to permit sources to send anonymously tips and data to the journalist, something will change, because in fact after the Cablegate or Iraqi file, every journalist dream to receive this kind of extremely interesting information and make the history of his life. But this has not happened. It has not happened for various reasons that will be analyzed on this panel, and those reasons mostly is that the whistleblower, the source, need to understand who is the recipient and trust to the recipient, and need to be guaranteed to be safe. So in this panel we have Tehoon of Publix, an important experiment in Netherlands that is here to explain the history of Publix, and Philippe, researcher of the Journalist European Observatory, Miranda of OCCRP, and of ERP Lorenzo, one of the manager of ERP Leaks, one of the whistleblowing system used by